what is
Yeah.
it like to get a script, I guess, acquired, purchased, paid for? I don't even
Yeah,
know what the right term is.
yeah, no, that's such a great question because I mean, I didn't know it, obviously, going into it. There's a lot of different ways that a script becomes a movie. A lot of times people will option, it's called option, they'll option the rights from your story. And what the option agreement is, it's a contract. I mean, everything you do in the industry is based on a contract. Get everything in writing, advice number one. Um, and so, and I have three scripts that are of mine right now that are option. And what that means is that the film company, production company that are holding the rights, they have to pay you a certain amount of money to hold those rights, but they have a certain amount of time. The option will be, 12 months, 18 months, whatever you agree upon and giving them that time to produce the film version. If they don't produce the film within that time that's in your option agreement, one of two things will happen. Either they'll renew it and you'll renegotiate your terms, or the rights come back to you and you get your script back and you can shop it all over again. So that's more of like the traditional way. I've had most of my movies that I sold a movie on social media. So, I mean, it's just the strangest ways to, yeah. I've had very traditional sales of scripts, but then I've had like the most non-traditional. So I enjoy both experiences because they're fun.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us at the Life of a Career podcast, David, Matthew. Before we get started, can you give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Eric, for having me here. I appreciate it. I'm David Matthew. I am an author, movie reviewer, playwright, poet, and screenwriter, multi-hyphenate for sure. And I write in multiple genres as a writer. I write in romance, thriller, horror, and young adult. I write in different forms. I write, obviously, stage plays and screenplays in script form, and then novels and short stories and poetry and narrative form. And yeah, that's pretty much who I am. And I review movies a lot too. I watch a lot of movies, love movies, talk about movies, and share all my knowledge of movies to anyone who's interested.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to that part where I think all of those things that you talked about, I have no idea how you make money doing it. So I'm
Mm.
excited to see what a career is like doing all of those things. But before we get there, what what did you want to do as a kid? Is this everything you dreamed your life would be?
Um, y- yes, it is, and then some. I have yes, in a very positive way. But I didn't start out wanting to be a writer per se. I was a really voracious reader. I read everything I could get my hands on as a young person. I would read the back of a cereal box. I mean, just whatever was there. I was very drawn to language and messages and how things were conveyed, emotions were conveyed through writing. Um, and when I was really young, I wanted to be a fireman, but then my life went in a completely different direction. And I thought about being a pilot for a minute too, but then I was scared of flying. Another story for another time. But writing happened to me. The discovery happened to me in second grade. I'm very, very grateful to my teachers that saw something in me at a very young age that I didn't have words for, quite honestly. And my second grade teacher, Mrs. Carter, shout out to Mrs. Carter, she asked us all to write a short story. It was for Halloween, and I turned in a 5-page epic that was a very complicated story called The Blue Witch. Blue is in sad. And it was about a witch who didn't want to be a witch anymore. And it was this emotionally complex character that, a 7-year-old had no business probably working on. But so she kept me after class. And I have to tell you, I was very scared. I thought, oh my gosh, am I in trouble? And what's happening? And then she called my mom and I was like, what did I do wrong? And she shared with my mom that, from teacher to parent, that she saw something there and thought, you really need to encourage this because there's a lot of storytelling capabilities there. And I loved to tell stories just, naturally as a person. And then suddenly I was like, I can write these down. And then when I was in the 6th grade, another teacher, this is going to be a teacher love fest, I have to tell you, another teacher, I had written, I was really, really inspired by soap operas at a very young age, mostly because of my grandmother. They were her programs, her stories, if you will. So I got like drawn into them just because they're so layered with all these different plots and characters. And it's a writer's dream, right? To just create so much conflict within a single episode. And I wrote a like in my little like spiral notebook, I wrote like my tribute to soap operas. I created my own soap operas called Life Isn't Easy. And my sixth grade drama teacher was looking for an original play. And she found out that I had written this. And she asked if she could read it. And she took it home over the weekend and brought back a script. She took it and turned it into an actual play script for the stage. And it was our sixth grade class play. And my mom sold Rice Krispie treats at intermission. It was like a family event for sure. And I got my first taste of playwriting then at the age of 11 in sixth grade. And then flash forward 2 more years, when I was 13, this was really like the transitionary moment for me, the moment where I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. A really wonderful young adult author named Norma Fox Mazer, who's sadly no longer with us, came to my junior high school, my middle school, as a guest author. And the school announced they were picking 10 students to have lunch with her one-on-one in the library at school. And I loved her books. Like I had read every book of hers front to back like multiple times. I was very starstruck, a 13-year-old of an author. And I campaigned for one of those spots. Like I've never campaigned for anything in my life. And I got picked. And I remember going up to her, and this was the moment where like everything just made sense for me, because here was an adult doing something for a living successfully that I wanted to do. And I thought, this is who I want to be when I get older. And I had made I'm not an artist at all. So I had drawn like really awful, like with Crayola markers, like a cover for like a handwritten story. And I took the story to her and I was like shaking like a leaf. And I really want to be a writer. And she looked at it and she said, you already are. And it was that moment of validation for me of having an adult who was already doing that say to me, you're already doing this. You can do this. This is who you can be. And 2 years later, I published my first short story. It was in a collection that UC Berkeley put out called Across the Generations. And it featured writing from writers from all different ages, from like 5 all the way up to like 95. And one of my short stories was picked, and it became my first published piece. And then I never looked back. And from there, my life just sort of took a really interesting, really wonderful creative turn. And I started writing plays and poetry and novels and the whole thing, and never looked back, not once. But I really am very grateful to those teachers that saw something in me and encouraged and made things happen in a really wonderful way.
How old were you when that was published? That seems
15.
like a really...
I published my first short story at 15. I was a sophomore in high school at Berkeley High School.
Yeah, that sounds like a very formative experience.
Yeah.
That validates, wow, I can do this. That's...
I remember they had like a book release party for the anthology, and I got invited. I was too young to drink the champagne that they were serving, but just like being in this room with all these, very elite, highbrow, very successful writers that had contributed, because at the time, Bay Area was just thriving with wonderful writers that were coming out of that area. And to be in that room and be in that company and amongst that energy, I was like, yep, these are my people. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it was obviously an experience that changed me forever.
So really, like the teachers that were in your life was really sort of crucial to get you into this world, right? That they encouraged you, and then they even, I assume, they helped push your writing to get published, right? Unless you found a way to submit it yourself.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I had a wonderful mentor named Donna Cummings, who's an author herself, and she was my step grandmother, I think. Like we were married into each other's families, and she, when we met, I told her I was a writer, I was working on stories, and she really took me under her wing at 14 to 15, and she really helped see me through that first publication process in a really great way, because she'd done it before and I had not. And there's a business side to it. There's certainly a creative side, but it's an industry and there's a business to it. And so, and I think she wanted to make sure that my first introduction to the business side of things went well, because if it didn't, it could have turned me away from writing. And it did. It was a great experience. And so I was very, very lucky. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I've there's been many people that have helped me get to where I am and where I'm going, I should say too. But and I recognize that, and most of them were teachers. Librarians have also been very kind to me in my life too. So I think I don't come from an overly creative family, and so I think doing something that was so different than anything anybody else wanted to do. Certainly, my family was supportive. My mom uh, saved up and got me a secondhand typewriter when I was 13, and I didn't know how to type, so I taught myself how to type, and it was very loud and obnoxious. But so I certainly had the support at home, but I don't think they understood like the creative process or what it meant to get something published and so forth. And so having those other people that were already in the industry that my life just connected me with in a really wonderful way, really changed and just moved things along quicker for me, for sure. Because I had people looking out for me, which I think is really important. I had a really good support system, and I didn't know that it was a support system at the time. So, but now looking back, I can definitely see it for what it is or what it was.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think that in your school system it was very common for that type of teacher support to their students? Um,
Well, I grew up in the California public school system, so I was very fortunate because a lot of the schools that I went to had some sort of creative element, whether it be theater, creative writing, student publications, and yes, I think all of those co-curricular opportunities that I either sought out or found me some way definitely helped shape me and give me channels. I mean, just to be able to get my work out and read and experienced and um, looking back, I feel very, very a deep sense of gratitude of where I grew up, when I grew up, how I grew up, and having those access to people. A lot of my friends growing up, their parents were teachers. One of my very best friends, her mother was a professor at UC Berkeley, and sitting at her dinner table, hanging out and listening to her mom talk about all these great things and philosophers and just Greek myths and all these things that just I absorbed. And they made their way out some way somehow in different forms of writing, I'm sure.
yeah, that sounds like an amazing environment to grow up
Yeah.
in, especially for someone like you who actually wanted to do something creative,
Hmm.
and then to be like affirmed by your community, basically saying, "Hey, you're actually doing a really great job. Let's keep this going, and we want to help you." So 15, you get published, and
Hmm.
then I assume that sort of pushed the trajectory of what you wanted to do after high school, right? Could you talk a little bit about what happened after high school?
Yeah, so I ended up going to college in Chicago, and I stayed in the fiction lane for a little bit, and I did some more short stories and so forth. But I ended up in theater, and I went to a community college in Sacramento, where I originally from, and they had a student one act play festival, and it was to produce original scripts written by students. And I was an acting major at the time, and I quickly changed majors to playwriting. But I and so I was like, I'm going to submit a script, I'm going to do this, I'm a writer. But I honestly, Eric, I didn't know what a one act play looked like the format of it. So I went to the school library like any good diligent student does, and I got a copy of 27 Wagons Full of Cotton, which is a collection of plays by Tennessee Williams, who's one of my favorite playwrights. He went on, Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, quintessential American playwright. And I remember looking in the book, and I took a short story I'd written in high school, one that I hadn't published, and I took the short story and turned it into the form of a one act play, and I turned it in, and I waited a couple of weeks, and my play got picked. And it was produced by the college. It was a little festival, student director, it was really well received. I wrote about a young woman, 17-year-old high school student, sort of like fed up with all the superficialness in her life and really is just looking for something substantial, and lots of teen angst, as you can imagine. And this is going to sound like a crazy story because this is my life, but there was a man in the audience. I think the second night, it was just one weekend that the shows ran, and he owned a theater company in a nearby town. close to where I was, and he saw it. And he kept me after the show and said, I'd really love to produce an evening of your one act plays up in my theater. And the problem was I didn't have any one act plays. So I'm like, sure, who's going to say no, right? Broke college student. And I did it. And I went home and I like turned a bunch of my short stories into one act plays. And I pulled all my friends together who were like broke, struggling student actors. And we made the trek up to this town and ran the show for a month. And at the end of the month, they handed me a check. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And it was like the most money I'd ever made as a writer. And I was the first time I'd made money as a writer. And I was like, I can get paid for this. It's something I love to do already. And so it really put me on the map. And then right before I got to Chicago, a wonderful theater publishing company called Smith and Kraus. And for any young student playwrights out there, I highly recommend connecting with Smith and Kraus. So this was many years ago, and they publish every year like the best monologues for women, the best monologues for men, the best 10-minute plays, the best of annuals. And I submitted my work, I sent it off, put it in the mail, didn't think about it for like 3 months. And then I heard from the editor. Her name is Jocelyn Beard. I'm very indebted to this woman to this very day. And that same play that I had written at my junior college in Sacramento became the first play excerpts of mine to be published. And she published parts of it in all three of the best of collections. And I remember the book came out, and like within a week, I had 100 requests from by email from producers and people who wanted to read, produce, so forth. And it literally launched my playwriting career. That got me a scholarship to DePaul, to the theater school at DePaul, and that's how I ended up in Chicago. And Chicago was so good to me, and the theaters there were good to me. So many of them produced early versions of my plays. One of my plays was produced there at a very tiny, it's under, I don't even know if it's still there. This was a very long time ago. It was under like a freeway overpass. Like you literally had to know where it is. You wouldn't see it just by like walking down the street. It was in the middle of nowhere. Well, no, it wasn't in the middle of nowhere. It was in the middle of the city, but it was like hidden, right? And it was a play called Frozen Stars that I had written. I was so broke, I didn't have my own computer, so I wrote it in the computer lab at DePaul. Because that's what you have to do when you're a broke college student. And and it was a very early draft of the play, but we produced it anyways, and we put it up on its feet. And I had a great female director for it and so forth. And like there was like 6 people in the audience, and this woman named Belle Hernandez, who I'm forever grateful to, happened to be in town for the Chicago Latino Film Festival. And the play is about a young Latin American woman in high school, first person in her family to graduate from high school. Really intense family drama kind of thing, very Latin themed. I married into a Latin family. My family's very blended with Latino culture and so forth. So she comes and sees this play because she has a night off from the festival, and she loves it. And she keeps me after and says, this needs to be a movie. This needs to be a movie. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sounds great. She went back to LA and wrote about Frozen Stars in a publication that she published called Latin Heat, which is all about Latino and at the time, there was a big Latin cultural explosion happening in Hollywood, long overdue. And many Latin themed projects were getting produced in a really beautiful way. Gregory Nava, who a film director, was part of that big movement. And there's a lot of indie films coming out, but there wasn't a lot for young women. And so she wrote about it, and my play got a lot of attention. I had meetings with HBO, Miramax, all kinds of people. I was just, really young and just like, what's happening into my life? And then Frozen Stars became a film, and it became an independent film. And they cast a young actress in it named Lana Padilla, who went on to be the evil Queen Regina on ABC's Once Upon a Time. And it was her first film, and it was my first film. And we, slept on each other's couches and did whatever we had to do to make this movie. And the movie was bought. We produced it independently, filmed it on 35 millimeter. Really quickly, like 2 days before the movie went into production, I was never supposed to direct this movie because I was a college student, not a film director. The director quit because he got another job at a bigger film, and I think it was like Seattle. and the producers called me and said, "You've got to direct Frozen Stars. You're the only one who knows this piece." I'm like, "I come from theater, you know." So, you know, I walk on set. There's like 100 people the first day, and I'm literally walking up to people, Eric. I'm like, "Hi, I'm David. I'm the director." And they're like, "Hi, I'm the gaffer." I'm like, "Great. What is that? What do you do?" And I had a really great director of photography who mentored me through the whole process. So, we finished Frozen Stars, and it was bought by a subsidiary of Sony, and it went to Netflix DVD and all these really cool places. We had a big premiere at the Directors Guild in LA, and that it just completely changed my life. Like the trajectory of my life completely changed forever. And that's how I got into film. That was a very long answer to your question.
No, I am captivated. I am
No,
I am
but
fully
that's yeah,
captivated.
my crazy life for sure. But you know, again, I had a tremendous support from DePaul. I had tremendous support from theaters and friends, and just like so many things, so many levels of support had to be there for all of those things to happen. Belle Hernandez had to be there. She had to see the play. She had to go back and write about it. So like I do believe in fate, you know. I believe in luck a little bit, but I really believe in like hard work is eventually going to get someone's attention. So, and quality work really. And so, yeah, and so I made the move out to LA, and I got an agent and all those great, wonderful things. And then about a year and a half into like just doing the LA grind thing and writing, and I was doing a lot of script doctoring, which is where they hire you to come in and fix scripts that need some help. Dialogue's kind of my thing, so they would hire me to fix a lot of the dialogue in scripts where you don't get credit for it, but you still do the work and make a living from it. I came to the realization that I was not as strong of a writer as I wanted to be, and I made a really difficult but necessary choice to leave LA and go back to school. And I ended up going to grad school. I went back to Chicago, and then I ended up in Atlanta and different places. And that was the best choice I made because I didn't want to put out work that was not crafted. And I really felt so, I'm a lifelong learner, and I feel like knowledge is everything. And if you're going to do something, you need to know how it's done very well. That's just something I believe in. So I needed to study the people who came before me. I needed to read scripts. I needed to read books. I needed to learn the mechanics of what I wanted to do to be better at it. And so I went back to school, and I've never regretted that decision because, of course, I got degrees from it, but I also got tremendous amount of studio practice and worked with amazing teachers and writers and students as well. Too many students that I was in classes with went on to do tremendous things as writers. And so just being in that company, you know, really makes you step up your game. So, but, and then, you know, and then I sort of went back, I started all over, and I started from the very beginning and didn't have a film under my name that was recent, you know, and so you start over. But I'm really glad that I hit that reset button, because I feel like if I would have kept going without having that craft under me, I don't think my work would have been as well received as it is today, because I would have had that breadth to it, that thing that makes it stand out from the pack sometimes. So, and I didn't know who I was as a writer. I really didn't know like what is my voice. I kind of dabbled in all these different areas, and so I really needed that focus and just being able to say, okay, what are you going to contribute to the world of literature, or are you? So
That's so fascinating that in just going back to Paul submitting how just what was it like to get, what did you have to do to get a, you know, play adopted by a theater? Like what was that submission
great
process
question.
like?
You know, I feel like I'm a very resourceful person just by nature. And I think as a writer, especially if you're writing for the stage or screen, you've got to really be in tune with what people are looking for and who they are and what they last produced, and have those points of connection. I think I never send something blindly to people. Even back then when I was a struggling college student, I really got a sense of like, this theater company produces this type of stuff. Oh, I have a script that really suits what they do already. Let me have that conversation with them. And so really it's about the this is going to sound so cheesy, but like if an opportunity doesn't exist for you, you have to go create one for yourself. And I think knowing where to do that and being really in tune with what people are doing, what they're producing, who's behind the scenes making those things happen, knowing who to go and talk to. I think that's so important, because I think if you just send something in blindly and you don't have that research behind you, I don't know. I think just having a conversation with people, like, I really love what you're doing. I would love to send some of my work to you to look at. I feel like it fits in with your mission and your values and your aesthetic. Would you, and often they'll say, yeah, of course we'll take a look at it, but I will tell you, for every yes that I've had in my life, and I know this sounds like a sad sob story, but it's really part of what I do. I usually get anywhere between 40 to 50 rejections for every yes that I get. And those rejections, you have to learn from them in a really important way. It took me a long time, because when you're starting out, you take everything very personal. Like, my feelings hurt. And then you realize, oh, it's a business. Oh, this is very subjective. Oh, this is just not this person's cup of tea, but there's somebody out there who's really going to like it. And I have to keep going until I find that person. And then when I do, we're going to have a really great conversation about how we can help each other. And I think it's just that search and discovery process that you have to go through as an artist to find homes, really good homes for your work, whether it's the stage, the screen, a publishing company, whatever you're looking for, because you need each other. I'm the content creator and they're the distributor, and we need both of those things to happen. So
Yeah, the did you ever have to sort of compromise at all from your creativity, or were you
yeah.
able to just take it, take what you had and then sort of adapt it to their
Yeah, I think early on, when you're really eager to please, and I think you have to find your own voice, your own feet, figure out what battles or what hill you're going to die on, kind of thing. I think that's really important to do. I did early on. I compromised a couple of times, and looking back, and not regrets, because they were certainly like teachable moments for myself of, I'm not going to do that again. But I think you have to go through those things. I really think that you have to experience the highs and the lows, because you're going to appreciate both of them differently once you do, and you recognize them. Oh, I'm in a really good place right now. This is a nice flow. Or, oh, okay, this is kind of a slow time. All right, let's go take a workshop. Let's go beef up that writing skill a little bit more. Let's go back to the classroom and rediscover the writing process and find new ways to tell stories. So I think you just have to really be attuned to that and just kind of let it happen, because it is going to happen. I mean, the rejection is in what I do is, and I say rejection, and it's really not rejection. It's selection. It's really just about selection. And sometimes you're selected and sometimes you're not. And when you're not selected, if they give you that feedback of like, this was really great, but here's the problem areas. And if enough people tell you that, you got to go back and look at those problem areas and fix them, and be willing to do that and open to that criticism, because they're the gatekeepers when you think about it. And if you want to get past that gate, you've got to do what you got to do. And it's hard. It's really hard, because you want it so bad, but you don't want to sell your soul or sell out your craft and so forth. And it's a really tough decision, I think, every artist has to make about what is that line for you. Like, what is that line you won't cross in terms of compromising yourself or your work?
That's so interesting that that you were able to figure out, like, I will tailor it specifically for what that theater is known for, and then going from being able to make a movie, right, that's to directing 100 people, going to LA, right, and then to go. And
I was like 27 when that happened to me, just so you know. So it was like, what is happening in my life? Sorry, just to give you a little bit more context.
Yeah, and then that was the stepping stone for you to go to LA. And you said you were working in LA as a writer. Who are you writing for? If you can, I don't know if you can
I
talk about
was
specifics, but
Yeah, I was pitching a lot. So I was brought in. There's a couple of really popular sitcoms at the time, and I'd written a stage play called Pensacola. That is about a family of Southern women. It's been compared a lot to Steel Magnolias, but it's very different because it's more about immigration and a little more political than Steel Magnolias. But because of that play, I was being brought in a lot to be considered interviewing for like scriptwriter, staff writer room kind of stuff, on sitcoms that were similar in like style and tone and comedy that I had written in that play. But interview after interview after interview, and I had a couple of gigs here and a little bit of stuff here and a little bit there. The piecemealing, kind of that grind. I wanted something much more substantial. I wanted something that had a little bit more foundation under my feet. And I knew that not having the language and all the things that I would learn in school was working against me. It was too soon, if that makes any sense. I mean, it was really great to have that success and to have that response, and to have one of my plays turned into a feature film was just extraordinary experience. But my writing wasn't ready for it at that level. My writing wasn't at that level yet. It was still, it needed to be uh, definitely more shaped in a really good way. And so but just went back and headed back to school, and then learned, and just was open to learning from people who were in the industry and doing what I wanted to do.
and what
And my
was it?
work is so much better because of it. I have to tell you, because like I have like my writing before an MFA, my writing after an MFA, and they're different. They're completely different.
Yeah, and then so was it heavily intensive in terms of writing then during the master's or graduate program?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was 2 years of, and it was intense reading as well, intense critiquing. And you had to write a creative thesis as well as an academic thesis. And I really looked at, for my academic thesis, I looked at so much of what I write, a lot of what I write, especially on the novels, is first person female, just because that's I have a lot of female readers, and I just feel comfortable. I feel more inspired telling stories about women. I don't know, it's just a thing. And women's stories are really fascinating to me. And so I studied a lot about writers writing in the opposite gender of themselves, like, Judy Blume writing a lot of, not a lot, but a few books that were written for young teen boys and so forth. And so just kind of looking at that. And also, too, just, a big topic of conversation still is cultural writing, of who should be writing for what culture and so forth. And I looked at, so is it, the question I kind of posed was, where is the balance about who's permitted to write the story versus, is it more important that the story is getting told? And so it just created a really good, interesting research project for me, and it really kind of made me look at my own work a little bit from a different lens of like, am I writing everything I should be writing, that I'm permitted to write, and where does that permission come from, and so forth. So yeah.
Mm. And then following grad school, what was the career trajectory from there?
Um, After grad school, I shifted back to novels. I just finished my 16th novel, and I went back to theater. I went back to writing plays. I stayed away from movies for a little bit because I didn't feel like I was quite ready for them. I did direct and produce a couple of things. I directed a really wonderful documentary called Why So Fly, about the female hip hop group Northern State. They were sort of like the female Beastie Boys. That was a lot of fun. I got to go hang out with them and be backstage and all kinds of fun stuff. I did a lot of projects like that, just kind of really creative, very female centric, very youth centric kind of projects. Sometimes as a producer, sometimes as a director. But the writing, I went back to theater, and I wrote. To date, I've written over 70 stage plays, and they've been produced all around the world in 13 countries. And the plays have been very, very good to me. A lot of those are published. Um, as a playwright, it can be a very lucrative life, both people buying your plays, producing your plays. I work with 7 different publishers between my novels and my plays, and have a really great, creatively fulfilled life in terms of an outpouring of content. I write 2 books a year. It keeps me busy. So, and my plays have been very, very good to me. Frozen Stars, which became a film, there's a monologue from the stage version of that play, which is uh, a lot of young actresses, Latina actresses, use that piece for auditions for schools and for plays and so forth. And so it's just, I just the writing, the projects have taken on a life of their own because they no longer really belong to me. Like once I write them and put them out into the world, they belong to other people, but in other theaters and so forth that are bringing them to stage, or a reader reading a book of mine is going to interpret the book sometimes very differently than I meant when I wrote it and so forth. But and I hear from readers, I get wonderful messages from readers through social media, and just librarians, high school librarians who connect young readers with a lot of my books for teenagers and so forth. And then I made it way back to film, and I've now written six produced films. A film that I wrote it was originally called Boxcar. It was originally a stage play, and a director in Philadelphia said this would be a really good film, and so I adapted it into a short film, and I submitted it to a film festival in Amsterdam, New Renaissance Festival, and it got selected as an official selection in their screenwriting competition part of the film festival, and I happen to have some frequent flyer miles left on Delta. So I jumped on a plane and I went to the film festival in Amsterdam, and my screenplay won best, or I think it was best unproduced script. I can't remember the exact. And there was a wonderful filmmaker there, Dutch filmmaker there named Koen Haver, who was looking for new projects. And by the time I left the film festival, he was committed to producing that script. And he did within a couple of years. And it became very successful. They translated it into Dutch because originally I don't speak Dutch, I'll tell you that, but the script was originally written in English, and so to have my work translated into a totally different language and distributed in a country I didn't even live in was just a wonderful experience. And the film is absolutely beautiful. He won a ton of awards for it in all over Europe, all over the world actually, and the two actors in it. It's about two young men in high school that can't go to a high school dance together because of conservatism and just homophobia, and they instead decide to spend the night together in a boxcar train, just out of isolation and just to be together and talk through all the things they're feeling. And he did such a great job with taking that story and making it very universal, and it was very well received, and I'm just thrilled that it is what it is. So the films, I will. So what I do, when I write a screenplay, I test the screenplay out through film festivals. Many film festivals. So if you're a young screenwriter and you're like listening to this, you're like, how do I get my screenplays produced in the hands of producers? Because those gatekeepers are very firm. It's like 1 in 1,000 people get through that gate. I don't know if that's a real statistic, by the way. I just made that up. But so what I did, I got very just resourceful as usual, and I started submitting my pretty polished, like second or third draft scripts to these film festivals, and a lot of them will give you feedback. They'll give you like reader comments, like people who read the script to adjudicate it, to judge it, will say really great dialogue, but the second act just needs some work. And so all of that feedback was like a teacher. All that feedback, I was like, this is exactly what I want. I'm going to go back now and fix the problems in the script and make it better and so forth. And then they started, some of them won awards and you win prizes and all sorts of things, and then you just have bigger conversations with people. And then I started having conversations with producers, and just started having those conversations about what it would be, how do we turn this into a film kind of thing. Film, I think the writing for movies is probably one of the toughest parts of the writing industry. I think it's so subjective and it's so tough. I don't want to dismay anybody, but you've got to do the work. Like you can't shy away from it, because there are a gazillion screenwriters right behind you with a script that's written even better. And so I can't stress that enough. If you're that young screenwriter starting out, studying screenwriting um, is just essential, because it's going to help you. Your work will level up considerably. So often, screenwriters that don't have training, their scripts are very overwritten. There'll be a lot of exposition. There'll be a lot of heavy dialogue. There'll be dialogue that doesn't sound like people naturally talk. And I had all those problems early on too in my own work, but it was through learning and schooling and studying the craft that I really got my scripts to a much better quality, to a producible quality. And so, I would really recommend looking at those film festivals. There's some really Film Freeway is a great organization that's very accessible. I think you can join it for like $10 a month or something like that's really good investment. And you can submit your script, your screenplay. A lot of film festivals will look at short scripts. I think short scripts are an excellent way to get your foot into the door for filmmaking. I kind of went backwards. I did a feature film first, and then I wrote some short films. But I feel like all of it is just what you make of the journey. But and anytime anybody produces your work, I'm very collaborative just by nature. You have to like move all of the things out of the way. You don't want to get into the way of your own project. And what I mean by that is a lot of times writers are so attached to their material that they're very resistant to other ideas from other creative people that might actually elevate the project. And they get stuck in that place of that they know best because they wrote it and so forth. And that can be a detriment to your project. I learned very early on, get out of the way of the project. I don't care who you put in it. I don't care I don't care what the soundtrack. I mean, I do, but it's not a deal breaker for me. My goal is to get the project produced, and I think the more collaborative you are, and the more willing you are to move the project forward in a really great way and not get in the way of it, the more success you're going to have. I've had people come back and ask to work with me again because of that work ethic, because I'm quote unquote easier to work with than a lot of writers. But I also understand that it's a business, and it's not about feelings, and it's not about, this is my best script I've ever written. It's about, you created content. They're not a writer, they're a producer. They need your content. Without your content, they don't have a movie. And there is a considerable value to that. But I'm a writer, I'm not a producer, and I really don't even consider myself a director anymore. But and I know my lane, and I stay in my lane, because if you go into another lane, then a lot of times people won't want to work with you as much. So it's just really important to know where you belong in that whole collaborative process, kind of thing. I hope I said that like diplomatically enough.
No, I think it's very practical of approach, right? To not just stick to your guns, I guess, in a way. Maybe the purity of the art is, you have to be willing to kind of, I really don't want to say the word compromise, but it's just like you have to just be practical on how to approach, the actual execution of the art. And because of that practicality, could you kind of talk a little bit about the business end of it? Like, what is it like to get a script, I guess, acquired, purchased, paid for? I don't even know what the right term is.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question, because I mean, I didn't know it, obviously, going into it. There's a lot of different ways that a script becomes a movie. A lot of times people will option. It's called option. They'll option the rights from your story. And what the option agreement is, it's a contract. I mean, everything you do in the industry is based on a contract. Get everything in writing. Advice number one. And so, and I have 3 scripts that are of mine right now that are optioned. And what that means is that the film company, production company that are holding the rights, they have to pay you a certain amount of money to hold those rights, but they have a certain amount of time. The option will be, 12 months, 18 months, whatever you agree upon, and giving them that time to produce the film version. If they don't produce the film within that time that's in your option agreement, one of 2 things will happen. Either they'll renew it and you'll renegotiate your terms, or the rights come back to you and you get your script back and you can shop it all over again. So That's more of like the traditional way. I've had most of my movies. I sold a movie on social media, so I mean, it's just the strangest ways to. Yeah, I've had very traditional sales of scripts, but then I've had like the most non-traditional. So I enjoy both experiences because they're fun. Um, and I think I think you've got to put yourself out there. I think you have to engage in conversations. I don't think you need to like overkill and like stalk people or anything like that, but I think you definitely need to have your voice out there. I'm very active on social media. I engage in conversations there with filmmakers. um, I, let them know about projects very politely that they might be interested in, so forth. I also use really wonderful screenwriting resources. Coverfly, I really recommend. It's a great submission tool for you want to use it for your very, very polished scripts, like you're really high, like they're ready to go in front of a producer. That's the other thing that I would recommend too, is making sure that when you send that script out, sometimes you only get one chance to get something in front of somebody, and you want it to sing right off of the page. And if it's not, you got to fix it and get it to that place. Don't be anxious to get your work out there, because sometimes if you wait long enough to fix the work, then it's even better. You'll get a better response. Um, Also to the International Screenwriters Association, which is ISA. I've had really great luck through both Coverfly and through ISA in terms of connecting with producers. Um, Virtual Pitch Fest is another great. That's again when you're really ready to pitch, because you're literally pitching directly to producers. I just had a producer request one of my scripts a couple of hours before this conversation through that. So you just, again, you have to have your work out there. You have to do the work. You've got to submit the work. You've got to pitch the work. You've got to believe in the work, and it's got to be high quality. What do I mean by that? It means like you've gone over every single scene, every single word, that your characters are fully developed, your dialogue is believable, there's conflict, there's resolution, or maybe not. There's, you have got scenes that move. It's just everything. And writing for movies is very technical, because you're telling a visual story that, everything that happens in that screenplay has got to be shown on the screen. So if you're putting exposition in your screenplay for the reader and it's not on the screen, you're not writing a screenplay, you're writing something else. So it's hard. It's really hard. And then also the format that screenplays are written in is so industry specific, and it's a hard format to learn for sure. There's a great resource called the Screenwriter's Bible. It's like $20 on Amazon. They have a new edition come out every couple of years. When I teach screenwriting, that's the book I use to teach with, because it's really a great resource and tool for understanding the format of both television writing and film writing, screenwriting. So really recommend that.
And then what is it like to sell a play? I guess because that might be a little bit different as
It
well,
is
right?
very different. So, yeah. So once your play is published by a theater publishing house, they will typically handle the licensing rights of your plays too. So I'm with 5 different play publishing companies that have my scripts. So let's say, Eric, that you own a theater company in Chicago and you're looking to produce a new play, and you've got 5 actors and you're trying to find something for 5. So you go on to a play publishing website and you start to look at scripts and you find one that you love. So you buy the script, and then you also license, you want to produce it 4 shows over 2 weekends, and then you pay that money there's a royalty that you have to pay. So when you buy that script, the playwright, me in that instance, is making money off of the purchase of the play. So is the publisher, obviously. And then when you produce my play, I'm getting a percentage of that royalty that you paid the licensing fee to produce the rights to produce the work on stage, and so is the publisher. But they they facilitate all of that. So they're the go between the middle person, and they take a good percentage, but they're doing all that work for you, and taxes and all that other stuff that you have to worry about as a writer. But It's really great because I tell you, like not too long ago, I had a couple of my plays that were produced at the University of Guam, and because of the time difference, I was asleep and in California, and the plays were being produced. And so, as a playwright, I was making a living in Guam while I was asleep in California. It's a great job, right? So, um, but again, the way that my plays get produced a lot is being out there and talking about them and sharing stuff about them. And certainly the publishers do their own fair share of marketing too. But and then I have to tell you, if you're a young playwright, again, submit your work to Smith and Kraus. Every year they put out a submission call for monologues and excerpts from short plays. They are really supportive of new playwrights, and having your work in those books becomes a calling card for your scripts. And publishers will reach out, and producers will reach out, and actors will perform your stuff on YouTube. I mean, it's just a great world. And I think playwriting is so often people think playwriting is just you have to live in New York, and I've never lived in New York, and my plays have been produced in really great places all over. So there's a lot of myths about that. There's a lot of myths that you can't make money in playwriting. I find playwriting can be very lucrative. So you just have to understand the business of it, and you have to have your work out there in those spots that people can see it and find it and read it and perform it. So a lot of times, like for me, an actor will read a monologue of mine from one of my plays, and they'll really like the monologue and they'll perform it, and then they'll read the whole play, and then they get the play produced at their school. And so it just becomes this sort of like extensive relationship of possibilities for both income and for opportunity. And don't be ashamed or afraid of making money off of your work, right? Because people need plays and screenplays, and if you're making them and creating them, you should be paid for them. So very well, and it's okay to do that, So and it's okay. I think a lot of people are so eager to please, about just sort of giving their work away just to get it up on its feet, but you don't have to do that always. So you shouldn't do it at all. But just my advice.
What
People
do you
should
think
pay
is
you for your work always.
Yeah. What do you think is the best way to understand like the market rate for, a piece of work? Is it going through those publishers? Let's say for the playwriting, is it they will be able to tell you, hey, this is the approximate market rate for the type
Yeah,
of
they
play?
for sure they will. I mean, there's a couple. You can certainly go that traditional route. There's a handful of very large theater publishers in this country. Um, You can also self-publish your own plays, quite honestly. I do both. I created my own press about 5 years ago. I had some plays that were really niche kind of plays that were really for specific audiences that a traditional big house publisher wouldn't want to take on because there's not that like mainstream commercial appeal. And I have those plays too, obviously. But and when you self-publish, you do have to take on or have somebody. I have two really wonderful people that run the press for me, and they're based in Chicago, ironically enough, Chicago. But it's okay to do that too. I mean, in this day and age, there's so many avenues and channels for you to put your work out there on your own. But what I do recommend is if you're going to publish either route, traditional or self-publishing, creating your own press for your plays, books, whatever you're writing. For your plays, I really recommend getting your plays produced before you publish. Make sure that you've tested your play in front of an audience, sit in that audience, listen to the reaction, get the feedback from the producer, the director, the actors, the tech people that worked on your play, because you want to write the best blueprint, architectural blueprint you can for theater. And you want to get all those things ironed out and worked out before you put it out in published form. Because once it's out in published form, it's like, that's it. So I just really recommend that even if you get a group of actors together and you feed them pizza and you sit them at a table and you listen to them read your script, that's still better than just writing something and publishing it right away, because you're working things out. Theater is an audience driven form of literature, and theater is written to be performed, and of course it can be a good read too, but it's really written to be performed on its feet. So I think you have to do yourself a favor as a playwright and get your work produced, uh, get it up on its feet, even if it's a staged reading or a table read, just to work out all those possible issues before publishing it.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. There's just so much
There
that
is so much, I
there's
know.
this. Uh, I love that you're such a breadth of like knowledge in
Oh,
this
thank you.
world. It's just I'm not even asking questions because it's so fascinating to me because this is an unfamiliar world.
Mm,
Um, and I'm just trying to think of, how do you know what to sell your, the Playwright, you might actually have a, publishing
mhm,
house that can tell you approximately what these things are worth. But what about like, for film? Like
mhm,
how do you know what something is worth to put it up on option, right?
mm.
If it's not a direct sale right off the bat, and is it usually a one-time sale? Like, right, let's say option, they want it, and then they exercise the option, they purchase it.
Yeah, the contract can be really different. Sometimes you'll have like sequel rights. I mean, there's a lot of different merchandising, soundtrack. There's a lot of stuff you can get in there as a writer. I think if you get to that place that somebody's putting a contract in front of you, you want to call your aunt or uncle, whoever's in your family who's a lawyer. So I know that sounds very like call a lawyer, but I here's why. Film contracts are long and lengthy and detailed, and film is forever. Film is going to live forever, and you, as the writer, want to make sure that you are getting the best terms you possibly can for that script. If that turns out to be the only movie that you ever write, and you're going to live off of that film for quite some time or however long, you want to make sure that everything is there in your favor. Not to say that anyone's out to cheat you or steal from, but their interest is their interest, and you've got to make sure that you've got somebody looking out for your interests, especially when it comes to legal language. They don't teach a lot of contract stuff in writing programs, unfortunately. I wish that there was more emphasis put on the business side of things for that very reason, because there's a lot of tough lessons out there. I've certainly had to learn a lot of things the hard way too. um, but you really want to make sure that somebody looks at. A lot of people work with agents. I've worked with agents, I've worked with managers, I've done things, I've negotiated on my own, but I didn't negotiate on my own until I knew enough about the industry and contracts to be able to do that. So and even when I still have other people look at my contracts before I sign them, just even today, just because you want to make sure that everything is on the up and up. um, so I don't be afraid to ask and have those resources, foster those relationships so that when you do get that contract, somebody can look at that, because um, you never know. I mean, there's, you and I both probably know stories about films that just blew up, and independent filmmakers made it with just a hope and a prayer, and then their film made $1 gazillion, and hopefully those filmmakers had a really great contract. And I know it sounds so businessy, but the business side of it, I think it's really important to educate yourself, ask those questions, go to those webinars. If you don't know the information, there are people out there that do know the information. Sometimes they cost. You got to kind of search and do comparative shopping and looking, but you got to educate yourself, and all the information is out there. It's really, I think today you can go to school and learn all the craft and mechanics stuff of writing, and you can really self-teach on all the business side of things and ask those questions. I went to a lot of those film festivals that my screenplays were in, and I would go and sit on panel conversations and listen and ask questions, and how do I do this and how do I do this, and then you start to kind of formulate all of this information. It's just like anything else, the longer and more you do it, the more you understand it. But um it's the potential of financial success in this industry makes me want to tell anyone who's listening to this to really make sure that somebody looks at that contract for you. And it's, I think every writer's journey is very different, like how they first got published, how they first got produced, how they first sold a script. I think if you had 10 writers here, they'd all have completely different stories of how that happened. So it's okay if you're not where you want to be in your journey yet, because every journey is so different, right? I mean, quite honestly, my literary leveling up and higher level of success came much later in my second half of my life, especially with novels. I didn't have a best-selling novel until I was in my 40s, and so it's okay if it's not happening right now. You just have to keep at it and keep studying and keep being in that arena. Keep showing up, because eventually, if you're a good writer and you've got a great story and you've got, the drive and the collaborative spirit, someone's going to take notice, and it'll happen for sure.
What did it take to write a best-selling novel? Is it, is there a huge business component to it, a
Oh yeah.
marketing component to it, or is it just write great work and
I sound so like businessy, and I never, but yeah. I mean, there is definitely the creative side, and I love the creative side. I just want to say that, but um, I wrote a young adult novel called Marijuana Mermaid about a young girl who lives in Chicago, the theme of today, and she gets into some trouble in her school, and her mother and father are divorced. Her mother sends her to live with her father in California, in this little seaside town. She gets a job at aquatic themed theme park, and wants to be the star at an underwater mermaid show. And it's very and there's, of course, marijuana there in the title. She learns a lot. She goes through a lot of stuff. She's sort of like bad girl gone good kind of story. Gets roped in by two mean girls in high school and has to try to break away from it. Anyways, I sent this book everywhere, like every publisher you can think of, every agent you can, like over 100 people. No, no, no. I kept getting that it was too provocative for teenagers. Librarians would never talk about this book. Just no, no, no. It was too wild, or whatever you want to call it. And then this female-owned publishing company, KL Publishing in LA, read the book and took a chance on it and published it. And they published it on 4/20, April 20th, which was great marketing, I have to tell you. And they really got behind the book. I think I was one of their first young adult books. They were a pretty new company at the time. And at that point, I had written 11 other novels. It was my 12th novel. And in the first year, Marijuana Mermaid outsold all of my 11 novels in total that came before that book, because it just hit at the right time and hit with the young people really embraced the book, and readers were really good to it, and reviewers were good to that book too. And had I given up at that 50th agent or that 50th no, I would not have had that experience. And it also created a lot of interest in my books that came before it. I got the rights back to those books, and we repackaged them and republished them, and they became totally different projects for me. And all that interest in those older projects came because of that one book. And then my books since then have done well because of that book too. So but I knew how important marketing was. And I got on TikTok, and I got on all the places that I needed to be to talk about Marijuana Mermaid, and it paid off in a really great way. And I feel like too, my publisher, the publishing company, KL, they just understood the book. They knew the book. They knew the audience that it needed. The cover. They knew like how to get that book out there, and that's what I needed. I needed somebody that loved the book as much as I did, and it took probably like 4 years of shopping that book before it finally hit, and it took even longer than that to write it. But and then it did its thing. But it was such a lesson to me in perseverance and in waiting and patience, and don't give up on yourself and your book if you believe it. And I believed in that story. I still believe in that story. And now we have interest in that book for television. So we'll see if that happens, but for streaming, but we'll see, because interest comes and goes, to be honest. But yeah, it's very exciting. But is there a formula? I don't know if there's a right or wrong formula to how to write a best-selling novel, but you have to understand the strategy behind it. Marketing is everything. I think the writers that really struggle, because most writers are they're not like me. They're very introverted and very quiet into themselves, and it's hard to get out and talk about our own work. It just feels like yucky self-promotion. But if you don't talk about your work and to share your story, there's no one else is really going to do that for you. And it's hard for those writers, because in the day and age, the books that do really well are often written by the writers that are out there and sort of a personality behind it. And it helps. I feel like it helps a lot. So it's hard. It's if you're an introvert and want to get out there and sell that book. I always joke that novels have the shelf life of yogurt. And so you gotta enjoy those 4 weeks that that book is out, because then it's everybody's on to another book. And you got to be present and out there and talking about the book and sharing it in every way that you possibly can, which feels tough sometimes, but you just got to power through it and do it. It'll make your book happen in a bigger way for sure.
Yeah, that's what is a day to day like then as a writer of basically everything you can write, right? The screenwriter, playwright,
Mhm.
novelist. What is a day like for you, or maybe a week? How does
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. My work is really divided out by the year. It sounds kind of crazy, but I have really like from like November to February is a peak writing time for me. Like I'm writing every day, November, February. It's just because of when things are released and when they come out and cycles for everything. But it's also the time of year too that I make the most time to write, because I it's just, have a lot more downtime during that time to be able to do that. Um, I don't like the writing. I don't think is as challenging as getting the business side of things done. There's days when I have 15 emails that I have to like approve a cover or send back the final edits of this or that, and it's let me have worse problems to complain about. I'm not complaining, but it's just like balancing those things of having that quiet creative time to be able to write and create content, and then having that like switching hats, switching gears, and be like, okay, now I've got to do all the promo business kind of stuff. It's really important to pay attention to both of those things so you have that balance, because you need both to move forward. A typical day for me, I usually write, I'm usually working on two projects around the same time. One will be a novel and one will be either like a stage play or a screenplay. So they're different forms, which I'm right now working on a television pilot that's adapted from one of my stage plays. And then I'm also working on a horror screenplay, spooky screenplay as well, which I'm very excited about. So I'll write in a single session for like an hour, just do free writing, just throw it on the page. Then I'll go back to it later and shape it. I don't edit as I go. I just want to get the flow, get the writing out on page. A lot of times it's not very good words, but I'll go back and clean it up and fix it and retool it a few times. And so every session's kind of like, okay, oh, this is an editing session. I'm going to edit. Oh, this is a writing session. I'm just going to put words on page. Or here's an hour for me to catch up on emails and do the things I need to do on that side of things too. And then, you got to fit in like social media, like all those other things that you need to do, because you're really a brand. I know that sounds very like schmaltzy marketing speak, but it's true. You are, and you've got to be out there and engaged and talk about your work and so forth. So November through February is really the peak time for me. And then during the rest of the year, I'm planning, I'm researching, I'm reading, I'm looking at what's new, I'm watching films, I'm reviewing films. And so yeah, it's kind of so I plan out my whole year. So like, this is like my method to my madness. This is a form of insanity. I will tell you this for sure. So like right around like October, early November, I literally plan out the projects that I'm going to do the following year, whether they're books, whether they're screenplays. And I usually do about 10 or 12 projects a year as a combination of, usually it's two novels, couple of scripts, couple of new plays, a couple of like short one act plays, things like that. And so I have this huge like pot of ideas and titles and working stuff. And then I look through those and I feel like, what do I feel like doing in the next year? What's really speaking to me creatively? And then I'll line those up. And then it's all about time management. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to write for an hour at 10 o'clock on Monday. Here's the project I'm working on. And so it just kind of goes from there. I told you it's totally insane, but I will tell you, I have to share this with you because I feel like you might appreciate this, and anyone who's listening to me ramble on might appreciate this. But I had a really great professor in Chicago. I had a really great professor who sat me down one day. This was towards the end of a semester, and she was a very successful, she still is a very successful young adult writer. She'd written like 50 or 60 young adult books, or tons of books for like young readers. Very successful writing career. And she said, I feel like you're gonna really take this on as a professional career, and you're gonna just power on and do this. And let me give you some advice. If you want to be a successful writer, no matter what form you're writing in, you have to treat your career like an airport. I was like an airport? What do you mean? And she said, you have to have something landing, loading, and taking off constantly to stay in the game, to stay relevant, to stay, to keep producing content. Um, if you want to do it at that high commercial successful level. And I said, I absolutely do. And I took that advice to heart and I applied it. And I've done that ever since. And it literally, like, approaching everything from that model of having, okay, here's the projects that I have coming up. Here's the stuff that's going to, like, I have a novel coming out in June and I know it's coming, like, knowing when all those things are happening. And sort of, that's the method behind the madness of how I plan out a year in my life as a writer. Is that airport approach, is that here's what's landing, here's what's taking off, here's what I'm going to be working on. So kind of a crazy analogy metaphor, but fun for sure. Right? So whenever I'm in an airport, I always think about that the way she told me that story, that gave me that advice. So
Yeah, what I'm amazed about is, one, that is very practical advice of, like, the business aspect of it to a certain degree, right? You're producing a product constantly to stay in the game so that you have something to sell. And what is shocking to me is how many different products you're talking about. You said 2 novels, and then you know playwriting and screenwriting and short, like, it just, how do you do that with, like, how can you squeeze that many?
I have to tell you, Eric, I am so blessed with ideas. I'm never short on ideas, but so many ideas come to me. People share their stories with me. I'm kind of like a satellite, and I get the story, and then I'm like, okay, am I going to tell this story? If so, what, in what form? I love writing. Obviously, I think it's come across that I love what I do. I love storytelling. I love telling stories in different formats and everything. I love that. I love the response from readers. I love sitting in an audience and having people watch a film of mine or a play of mine, and them having that experience emotionally, hopefully in a good way. And I just love the process. I love collaborating with other artists and directors and producers. And I'm really lucky that I get to get up every day and do something that I absolutely love to do, that gives me so much back in so many ways. Writing itself is so solitary and quiet and very isolating. Sometimes it's just you and your computer, or and your characters in your mind, your imagination. And to be able to imagine something and then put it on paper and then it take on another life of its own is literally why I feel so inspired to tell as many stories as I can while I'm here, to tell them, really, quite honestly. And I'm not an idle person, and I feel like I make the most of every single day. And writing is always a part of that day. And I'm so, so, so fortunate. My writing has taken me, I've gone to Amsterdam, I've gone to just, places around the world. I've met incredible people. I've had these really beautiful, rich experiences because of writing. And I feel so fortunate every day. I feel like I need to honor it because it was given to me in some shape or form for unknown reasons. And that while I have it, I'm going to do as much as I can with it. I know a lot of people are like, how do you write somebody? And that's just how I'm wired. And that's just what I do. And that's just the thing that works best for me. But if you're that writer and you're hearing all this and you're like, how the heck do you do all that? You do what works best for you. That's what, that the high level of output works really well for me, just because I have so much to say. But if that's not you and you just need to write that one novel in your lifetime, that's a huge accomplishment. I mean, no matter what you do or how much you do of it, to take a story, something from your mind that you've created, and give it another life form that other people are going to experience, even if you only do that once, it's an extraordinary accomplishment, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for hours more, because there's so many other detailed questions that I could ask about, how do you work with producers and all those things, and maybe we'll be able to have a second part to this. I just know that I've taken a lot of your time, and I don't even think we've gotten through your entire career yet. But I wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to provide any last advice or something that you really want to hit home that maybe you haven't.
Mhm.
And then maybe we'll go into more of a technical interview at another time.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's that. And thank you again, Eric, for having me. I feel like I talked your poor ear off, but but
No,
I
I
really
really
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it. I
Oh,
think this
good,
is
good. I'm
so
glad.
interesting.
Good.
Usually I would have to push people to tell, and the way that you dived in, like
Mhm.
it's practical, right? It's uh, very detailed, and I just really appreciated everything you were saying. That's why I just let you go. It's
Oh, thank you. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
and I am honest about. I would love to hear more. I'm just trying to be respectful of your time because
Oh
I
yeah,
would
no,
love
and
to.
I appreciate that, and I just appreciate the opportunity to share my journey and experience and all those things with your great viewers and listeners. I think it's just remarkable, and thank you for doing this and just for giving artists a platform to talk about their work and to share the knowledge. We talked earlier about this, but for me, it's all about pay it forward, and but the thing I just wanted to impart is I really just want to encourage, a lot of people told me this coming up when I was quite young, but it's to write without fear. And I feel like so often we get in our own way and we're concerned about what people are going to think. And I, whoever's listening to this, watching this, you have stories within you that only you can tell. And you have to, you don't hold those back. Don't get in your own way. Don't be scared. Write without fear. There's nothing to be scared of. It's just tell your story, because somebody out there really needs your story. They need to hear it, experience it, read it in whatever form you give it to them. So go for it and do it, and don't be scared of it. Just roll up your sleeves and do it. Yeah, that was imparted on me, and I live by that.
Mm, yeah, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Everything that you talked about, it's so fascinating to me because it's such a foreign industry. And I think that there's a lot of students out there that are curious about it. And, the general advice out there for when you say, I want to be a writer, everyone just raises their eyebrow and go, you might want to do something else, like do it a part time, right? No one has really a writer in their life that is successful and has actually turned it into a business and monetized it. So it's very rare to have this opportunity, and I really appreciate you sharing your story. And hopefully we get another chance to really talk about, like, hey, what's it like to work with the producers? What's it like to direct a movie and all of that? So
Yeah, and I'm always happy to help answer those questions if I can help in any way to anyone, for anyone at all. I'm always happy to do that because a lot of people helped me. So
yeah, and if anyone has any questions about the career, your story, where could they find you?
so I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook and I'm on TikTok, but I also have a website which is dmatthewb. It's DMATTHEWB.com, dmatthewb.com. And there's lots of information there. There's links too for resources for writers as well on that website too.
Okay,
People can
yeah,
reach out to me anytime though. I'm always happy to answer questions.
great. I appreciate that. And then we'll make sure to put all of those links inside of our wherever we're posting this, so
Okay.
that they can easily just find it without having to memorize. So
Yeah, right. I
yeah,
know.
yeah. So yeah, thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time again, and we'll chat again soon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us at Mentor Access. If you like what you just watched, please click like and subscribe, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when we have new videos come out. Thank you for supporting our mission.